anything to a marketing department is to say, oh, it's just like that last one that sold so well, only different. So whenever you go to an editor and say, I want to sell a book, they say, can you make it just like the last one, only different? That's why, for example, when I sold Halting State, I went badgering my editor saying, hey, I've got this really great idea for a really strange Scottish crime novel about computer crimes that don't exist yet. And the response I got was, you know, Charlie, that sounds daring. I'll tell you what, I'll buy it on condition it's a 2-book contract and the other book is a space opera. Which was Saturn's Children. Actually, it was meant to be the sequel to Iron Sunrise, but I chickened out at the time and said, well, can I do a Heinlein tribute novel instead? Because, you know, everything is easier as a sale with Heinlein invoked in the title. They're sort of mom and apple pie in American science fiction publishing. You can get away with almost anything if you just say, it's a Heinlein tribute. So I did.
And they bought it.
And they bought it. And this is why I'm currently on a contract to write 3 novels for Ace, each of which is a sequel in a different series. So yeah.
So you know what to do in the future.
Yeah, invent a new series.
One of the series that came out quite early was these fantasy novels, more or less fantasy. It starts out like fantasy.
Sold as fantasy. What happened? You need to be cynical to understand the publishing world. I had just sold a couple of books to Ace, both science fiction, and I was doing a chunk of freelance journalism at the time as well as selling novels because I just lost my job. So I was perforce self-employed as a writer, and a magazine was sort of in the process of going bust, owing me 4 months' money, which they didn't pay. So my agent basically turned around and said, well, you know, Ace have got an option on your next science fiction novel. You've got to show it to them before you can show it to any other publisher. And, you know, it's going to take them a couple of years to bother wanting another one because you've just handed in 2. How about you write me a nice fat fantasy or alternate history series that I can sell for lots of money to someone else? So, you know, for commercial contractual reasons, it couldn't be SF. So I came up with some ideas for possible series and sent them to my agent, and she said, and the general response was, that's weird, no. So finally I got wise and thought, okay, it has to be commercial, but, you know, I don't really like commercial, standard high fantasy. So this was before the whole paranormal romance or steampunk thing had really gotten underway. So I thought for a bit and thought, well, what I should do is steal from the best. However, if you steal from the best currently alive and kicking, well, you're trying to edge into an ecosystem where the niche is already occupied by a top predator. There's no point trying to be Robert Jordan or George R.R. Martin while they're alive and publishing. And, you know, I like George, and I wouldn't want to get into assassination. So I decided, let's pick on Roger Zelazny. You can't go wrong with Amber. But, you know, anyone can write a derivative clone of Amber. That's not really... Everybody will say you're an imitator. So pick another famous one who's still in print years after he's dead, and cross the streams. And I picked H. Beam Piper, whose Paratime stories are still in print. You know, he died in 1966. He has this setup where there are many parallel universes, and there is one civilization who's figured out how to make a machine for travelling between them. And they're systematically conquering and strip mining and looting all the other timelines because they know where the mineral reserves are buried. Put that together with Zelazny sort of feuding feudal nobles, and, you know, the twist on this is that they are in our universe. They're using us for trade purposes or for asset resources, for asset stripping, but they're primitives. You have these sort of high medievals who are stealing stuff out of our universe, rather than us being invaded from afar by high-tech people. And it pretty much wrote itself in 12 weeks flat for the first draft. And then I sent it to my agent, who kicked the tires a bit. And then we sent it to an editor at Tor, who decided he wanted to buy it. And then he chopped the book in half. And put a fantasy cover on it. Which is why, if you want the start of Merchant Prince's books, buy the first two at the same time, otherwise you're getting the first half of the novel. And, you know, I had the end, well, not only that, but I'd originally thought in terms of 600 or 700 page doorsteps because I was naive and innocent about the ways of publishing then. Turns out bookbinding costs mean that unless you're a bestseller, you will not get anything longer than 400 pages past an American publisher. So they chopped the first book in half, and then word came down from on high, Charlie, you have 300 pages per book. Use them wisely. While I was 200 pages into the beginning of a 900-page tome. That's why the plot in book 3 sags slightly. Books 3 to 6 were the second volume. By the time you've added enough extra material to make them standalone novels, they've swollen a bit.
So how many were there from the beginning?
It was originally a pitch for 4 books in a series, but only the first 3 were deeply outlined. Book 6 does sort of complete the second story arc. And yes, I did have that ending in mind from when I began. So, you know, I get email to this day from the Midwest, where people say, you know, I slogged through 500,000 words of your Merchant Princes series, I got to the end of the Trade of Queens, and you bastard, why do you hate America? You know, or, you know, that was a downbeat ending. Well, what did you expect would happen when the US government discovered they were being systematically looted by drug-smuggling narco-terrorists from a parallel universe? It wasn't going to end happily.
And let's change tack a bit with Accelerando. You wrote these stories in installments for Asimov's.
Yeah.
How did you get the idea to put them together in a novel?
Actually, that happened halfway through the second story. The first story in here, Lobsters, was written in 1999 at a point when I was programmer #1 at .com. You know, it was the first programming hire 2 weeks before they formed the company. I left a couple of weeks after it went public, so it was a successful .com. And we talk about exponential change in science fiction, but it's very hard to get a handle on it. I really got a handle on it in the late 1990s inside .com, when we were having 30% compound growth in our business. That's 30%, not 13%. We had 30% growth in our turnover, monthly growth, for 9 consecutive months.
Wow.
Now, the headache that gives is it's running on software. We're doing a service. And I was writing the software, and we were getting paid after doing the service, so the growth of demand on our servers was going like that. The time available for me, the time to do the work was growing like that. At one point in early 1999, my boss, the Chief Technology Officer, basically said, Charlie, I want your to-do list on my desk now. Okay, Dave, I'll go write it. 3 hours later, Charlie, where's that to-do list I asked you for? Dave, I'm still writing it. I got the to-do list to him before the end of business that day, along with minimum and maximum estimates on how long it would take. My immediate to-do list for the next 6 months was between 3 and 8 programmer years. Anyway, I nearly had a nervous breakdown during that job for fairly obvious reasons. When I left, they replaced me with a department. And one of my particular nightmares was a French software company, actually a French bank. The thing is, the business we were in, Data Cash, which is now a subsidiary of MasterCard, is we were taking credit card transactions over the internet from merchants and processing them through the British credit card system. And They were announcing and selling features before telling me, as the guy who was writing the servers, that the features existed or were needed. One of the features was dealing with multiple banks through one piece of software. The banks were all doing their best to keep their software proprietary, so you couldn't interconnect with another bank's equipment. Then dealing with different currency transactions, different account currencies. And then finally, a step too far, they wanted me to plug into a subsidiary of Banque Paribas in Paris. And you deal with the French banking system. And the French banking system is held together with software written by French programmers. The smart ones get out. This is not to say there are no good French programmers. There are some very good French programmers, but they don't work for the French banking sector. This system was trying to interface to this system was rapidly driving me to a nervous breakdown in late 1998. It got to the point where one Wednesday I just threw down my keyboard, got up, walked over to my boss and said, "Dave, I'm taking a long weekend off." "But you can't." Then he looked at my face. "Okay, take as long as you need." He was right to do that, because my immediate following words were, "I quit." So my wife and I flew out to Amsterdam, I think the next day pretty much. Just grabbed tickets and go. And we were sort of wandering around in the rain. I was feeling sort of dejected and mentally writing and rewriting my resignation letter whilst unable to get to sleep at night. The next day, on the Friday, I was wandering around in the rain when my phone rings. I look at the display and it's my boss. "Charlie." "Yeah." "It's about Clayline." That's the banking system I was trying to plug into. "Yes, Dave." "We've just had some news about it." "Oh." "Yeah, Banque Paribas have had a review and they're so dissatisfied with their subsidiary they're shutting it down." And behind him I could hear everybody in the office cheering. So I went back to work the following Monday. But that's when, instead of just quitting and having a nervous breakdown, I decided to divert the sense of weirdness that came with 30% compound growth per month for multiple months into a piece of fiction, which was a short story about... I hadn't met Cory Doctorow at the time, honest. But sort of an open source entrepreneur whose whole thing is putting people together to create value. And I wrote that story in early to mid 1999 and emailed the first draft to a friend of mine who said, "Charlie, this is wonderful, but you'll never sell it. The audience would have to have been reading Slashdot for 6 months." So I put it in circulation, and the first editor I sent it to, Scottish SF magazine, said, rejected it, saying, "This is vapid style obsessed post-cyberpunk crap."
Wow.
Does he still have a job?
Oh, he's the guy who bought the Atrocity Archives. Anyway, I finally sent it to Asimov's SF magazine, where Gardner Dozois decided to officially discover it, which didn't do badly. And the thing is, while it was in the in-queue at Asimov's SF waiting to be published, I realised it sort of ended on an odd note, and it needed a sequel. You know, there's obviously the relationship was clearly heading for a divorce 3 to 5 years down the line, a messy one. So I began sort of writing that divorce story because I figured it needed a sequel. And partway through, I suddenly had this blinding flash of inspiration and realised what I was trying to write. It was a story about the singularity. Not set before or after it, but the one that goes all the way through it. Because received wisdom in the year 2000 was, you can't write about the singularity from inside. You can write about what it's like afterwards or before it, but not during it. You know, at least that's what Werner Vinge was saying. I decided, that's a load of rubbish. I'm going to actually write a story about the singularity. I've got the first 2 stories about Manfred here. Manfred really needs 3 stories, each 5 to 10 years apart. I'm then going to write the next 2 generations, cover 100 years from the point of view of a spectacularly dysfunctional family. each of whom is almost a different species from their predecessors, told from the point of view of a family's robot cat. And it sort of mutated from there. Although, to be fair, Einako in Accelerando is not a robot cat. Einako is a very cunning, much smarter than human AI who has discovered that humans are most easily manipulated by a sock puppet in the shape of a cat.
True.
But anyway, that's that. And I burnt out the part of my brain that wrote that book.
Probably.